So we begin with a motivation and for the practice, for the teaching, for the session. So if you can, we begin with becoming mindful of the body, the posture.
Do you know Sayoban?
No. Okay. So we scan the body gently from the head to the toes. So go from the crown of your head, go across the face, around the eyes, the mouth, the jaws, down to the throat, across the shoulders, coming down the back, into the hips, legs. So here you can rest a while on the hips and see how your posture is, what your hips are in contact with, like a chair, yeah, the car chair, whatever, on the cushion, wherever you are. Then go down the legs, into the feet, and coming back up from the feet, legs, hips, to the front of the body, going across the stomach, abdomen, chest. Go across the top of the shoulders, down the arms, into the hands, and then back up from the hands, the arms, shoulders, neck, back of the head, and go to the top of the head again. And then pay attention to the whole body, with all its parts that we just went through. You can recollect a little bit the first session we had about the mindfulness of the body with all its parts. In nature, impermanent, changing second by second. And in nature, impure, that if you take each one separately or away from the rest, they don't have this kind of attractive quality to them. all of them put together in this certain order. We look at ourselves in the mirror, there could be this feeling of I, me, as we look at the body. But you can see it's just a composition of parts. There's no real, true, kind of truly inherent, independent body there. And just gently focus on the breath, calm down the mind. And then reflect a bit on the second session we had about sensation or feeling. How they can be kind of divided generally into mundane sensations and also kind of the spiritual side sensations. And then how we follow the mundane sensations as we contact sense objects. We have aversion, attachment, the afflictions arise, we create karma, and then we revolve, go round in samsara again and again. So I here reflect on true suffering, the first truth the Buddha taught, and then the true origins, the second truth. And you develop that spiritual feeling or sensation of this despondency, this sadness, but in a good way that we now do something to get out. We can do something to leave samsara. So in the space in front, we imagine the actual Buddha appearing. Reflect especially on the mental qualities that being developed, the positive side. The compassion, patience, wisdom. A being that completely purified their mind from all the negative tendencies, afflictions. And through his realizations was able to help all sentient beings by sharing the knowledge that leads to that kind of purified state of mind. Feel how lucky we are to be in this position in our lives, to have contact with those teachings, access to those teachings, with the conditions to practice in the same way that that being practiced. So here a spiritual sensation of joy arises. So we take refuge in that being, especially the teachings that the being, the Buddha, shared with us. And we take refuge in what we will also become ourselves. And we can surround ourselves with all sentient beings without discriminating of friends, enemies, strangers. They all are just like us, in the same predicament. and the concern and wish to help each of them, let that arise in the mind. And for that, we will listen, discuss, try to find methods, inspiration to keep track of our goal. Okay, with that, let's start the session. Sorry. So, like we discussed last session about the sensations, I didn't clarify exactly. The sensations can be kind of divided into mundane, or kind of worldly, or spiritual. So, the worldly ones are the ones we're trying to kind of identify and try to see how they trigger as we get into contact with the objects around us. They trigger a liking, and that's okay, and that's not the problem. But the liking can lead to attachment, and the disliking, the aversion leads to anger and all kinds of other negative emotions. That's why we see the sensations as being a cause for our suffering, right? Oh, can you? Sorry, I missed that message. Can I speak louder, Michael? Is that loud enough? Can you? Okay, cool. Okay, so then we go on to okay, then sorry, the spiritual ones are the ones we kind of develop. Like for example, we looked at just now the body. If we look at it closely, the impurity, actually how they're not in nature anything attractive that we normally put this label on. I mean, then we get quite attached to ourselves and also to others. That creates that attachment. Yeah? But if you look at it closely, like with mindfulness of the body as it is, we see its nature. We see it's changing second by second. It's actually impure by nature. You can't really find anything attractive to it. It can lead to despondency, it can lead to sadness, but this would be a good thing because this is reality. Actually, this is how actually it should be. Also, from there, it can lead to a kind of cool mind, like it's a pacified mind, because you're seeing the body as it is, right? And also, for example, looking at samsara in general, how we got into this mess, etc. Like looking at the say we recognize the feelings and sensations that lead trigger us to liking, attachment, or disliking, and then a craving not to have that person, that situation, etc. around us because it just disturbs us so much. So that craving also leads to samsara. But we see all that, we see it working, and there's the feeling of maybe kind of a sadness comes, despondency of how we're in this samsara. But that can be a good, in a way, a good sensation that leads us to find a way out. It leads us to look like for definite liberation, for example. So that, in a way, is good. Based on that sensation, we do something to get out of the mess. So in a way, some sensations are like can be seen in a spiritual way because it gives us some energy. Same with, like, for example, we looked at the say that the conditions we're in, that we're in this body fairly healthy, and the mind fairly healthy, and we can understand the teachings. It clicks, it resonates with us. We think, I have to do something with this kind of opportunities. Call it the precious human life, and that leads to a sensation of joy, right? Happiness, and that we need. It helps us because with that we understand the situation. We do something about this life. We use it meaningfully. Similar with looking at impermanence and death, for example, our own mortality, which is part of the mindfulness of the body, leads to kind of an unpleasant sensation. But again, it can be helpful. It can be very helpful for us to give us a kick into using every day, every hour meaningfully. See, so that those can be the spiritual sensations which can be used on the path. Right? So now let's look at the third one, close placement of mindfulness on the mind itself. So how's that done? So in this kind of the Sanskrit tradition, there's three main points of how to use the mind as the object. So first is looking at the impermanence. You know, a lot of the time we hear this phrase like "stay in the present moment." You know, a lot of schools of Buddhism, or some schools of Buddhism, are focusing on that, like stay in the present. But like His Holiness says in his books, you know, it's quite difficult to do that because actually there is no present. Even though you say the present moment, our mind is already gone. There's every moment, you know, is changing. You can't actually stay in the moment because that moment's already gone. So we have to kind of identify what we mean by staying in the present moment. Because every time we focus on that moment, already gone, a new one's coming, gone. You know, it's almost like not even abiding for a millisecond. It's just a continuation of moments of mind, right? If you look carefully, this thing we call mind, so the general mind, is of ever-flowing process, like a river. Like, and again, in the Buddhist context, there was no actual beginning to this. You know, it kind of we can't kind of a start, like the Ganges or something. It didn't actually start, and it's just constantly flowing. So since beginningless time, it's always been going. And unfortunately, we have been in samsara since beginningless time, all the time. Whichever realm we go into, this mind has been with us, and because it's mind, because of sensations, because of the craving, we're creating new causes to be in samsara, like that, right? As we look at that, we see the reality of the mind as just this constant flux of moments of mind, right? Nothing to actually cling to. It can actually lead to implicitly, again, the idea of it leads to an idea of selflessness. There is no real me here. So that's another way of looking at the mind. But the impermanence, understanding the impermanence of the mind leads to that. You know, so if we look closely how it's changing second by second, it can lead to that understanding of even there's no real me here, because sometimes we have this idea of this is I am mind, or I am my mind. Anyway, we'll go on that later. The first aspect of mind, the close placement, is just looking at the mind yourself as being changing, kind of second by second, nothing to really cling to. There's no real substance there. Right. The second way is to see what we call the conventional nature of the mind. So here it's a little bit about, because mind, a lot of us who studied kind of the Buddhist, basic Buddhist path, we know it's defined as clear and knowing, right? So clear meaning there's no real substance to it, no matter, physical matter. Knowing, it means it cognizes, it knows whatever object is put in front of it. If it's a mental object, a physical object, it just knows the object. Again, we use it quite often, this definition. I think maybe some of you have done Discovering Buddhism, the mind module, but we have to understand what actually is that clearness, that clarity, and what is that knowing. So it's a little bit difficult to actually to pinpoint, right? So here's probably where we actually look at what people are talking about, staying in the present moment, right? Because here we're trying to slowly, kind of look like when you have a glass of water, we're trying to slowly, like you take a glass of water, you let it, say, I don't know, maybe in Colorado, maybe you got like muddy rivers, you take a glass of water, When you take it, it looks like really dirty, but if you put it down for a while, all the sediment starts to settle. You see the clearness of water like that. I don't know. Maybe sometimes I don't know if you go like if you go to the sea. When you go to the sea, it looks so like some oceans, some parts of the sea which are clean. It looks so blue now, like blue, like turquoise. Like like if you go to the south of France, Côte d'Azur, Azur is like when you look at the sea, it's just beautiful. It's a turquoise color. But if you take a glass, there's no blue in the water, right? It's just clear like that. So we have that in our minds, this clarity in the minds, but we can't see it because our minds are constantly with these mental factors coming and going, sometimes positive ones, sometimes negative ones. The emotions come up, and we have this kind of joy, sensations come up. They go depending on causes and conditions, right? They're constantly like actors coming on the stage and going, like a film, or maybe like think of it like a blank canvas before you start the painting. You put all these colors on stuff. So our mind has that clarity, that blankness, but we're just not aware of it because all these emotions are coming constantly, right? And then, of course, not just negative. There can be also positive ones, depending on how we're thinking, what we're doing. So, but they're fleeting. So what happens here? To look at the conventional nature, we just try to sit and just relax and like the glass of water, let it be. Just let the mind be. So it's kind of some people. I remember Rene telling when he came once. He said some people have more that tendency. They can do it more easily. Some people not. So that's why some people can use this as their main focus of meditation, because as they sit, they just the mind settles down without doing anything active to it. Not kind of thinking of the future, not thinking of past, not thinking of past events, even remembering past contact with sense objects, and then sometimes wishing to have repeat the contact with the sense objects again in the future. So you just let it be. Right? Sometimes also we remember all the object isn't there in front of us. Remember having contact with the object. So our mind starts to think of that contact, or wants to think, oh, I wonder if I can contact again the new sense objects. So just stop the mind going to the past, stop the mind going to the future, and let it be as it is. So the mind settles down. It takes time. Even His Holiness said it takes to see that gap, that space. It takes for some it takes some time. So when you find that space where there is no thinking of the past, thinking of the future, that's probably what some people are calling stay in the present. But even that present, of course, is changing second by second. But it's that kind of that space where you're not kind of fantasizing so much or going back into the memories so much, just staying in the present. So that gives you the object of staying in kind of in the clarity of the mind. So when you see that clarity, you see these emotions that come up now and again, like clouds in the blue sky. So I think Lameshi uses this. You see, I think some of you've done the Discovering Buddhism, or even the Buddhism 1-to-1. It describes meditation where your mind is like an ocean, your mind is like the sky. So it's a bit like that. You're in that spaciousness. You're in the clarity of the water, like with all the sediment, etc., around you, whatever, plastic bottles or fish or whatever. That's not you're not concentrating on that. You're concentrating on that clarity of the water. Same with the mind being like the sky. You're focusing on that clarity of the sky, not going through all the clouds, whether they're black clouds or white clouds. They're just clouds, and they're not your business. You're in the clarity of the spaciousness of the sky. So that's what the mind is now trying to kind of focus on, that clarity. You put your attention, mindfulness on that, right? And you stay with that. So as that gap becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, you get to stay more in that clarity. It's an understanding of all these afflictions, and also, of course, the positive emotions that we have come due to cause and conditions. They're kind of fleeting, they're temporary, right? Advantageous. So, so of course, because I think when you look at one of the first charts we did, when we looked at the four objects we're using, the body, feelings, mind, we look at mind is to understand that it can lead to the fact that we can have the third noble truth. What's the third noble truth? True cessations. What does that mean? It means we can seize, like, different levels, of course, we can seize forever some afflictions coming up, the seeds of afflictions coming up, because we have the afflictions in many gross levels and more subtle levels. But when you understand how the afflictions are, they're kind of improper, but kind of we say wrong conceptions, the misunderstandings, almost like a lie. When you break that, when you see the truth, you cannot have that lie come up anymore in your mind. So that's what we actually call the true cessation. That's when the seeds of some of the afflictions are being stopped. So why is it happening? Because these afflictions, if you go back, are disturbing emotions. Some of you studied these things, and they're based on wrong conceptions. Right? So that's why they're like lies. So all lies can be turned by the truth. So when you see the truth, the lies have no power to come up anymore. It's not like they're just lying down, kind of dormant. They're actually cut from the root, so they have no power to come up, like a burnt seed. You see, they cannot give rise to any kind of crop or plant. It's a similar way in the afflictions are rooted out from the roots, in a way, from the origins, then they can't come up again. So that's why true cessations can come up. You see, so that's also why, if you think about it further, why something called liberation, which is complete freedom from samsara, which you cannot create negative karma or even contaminate the positive karma to come back into good rebirths. So all that stopped because you see the root of cyclic existence is the grasping at the self, the me, which is like the key thing in the Buddhist world, right? Because that's what keeps us, whether it's creating negative karma or contaminated positive karma, that's how we come back. So if the wish is not to be back, even in good rebirths, because you see them as impermanent, you see them in the nature of suffering. So you go back to the first noble truth, the true suffering, the contaminated or pervasive suffering, the wish to leave. Why we're in this mess is because of grasping at the inherently I, mind, and phenomena. So when you see that as a lie, when you see that conception, that affliction as fleeting, not like always present with mind, just like water isn't, no matter how much you mix the sediment in the Colorado water or whatever, or the sand in the sea from the Mediterranean, that sand will never become one with the water, right? They're always separate. They're there, but it's not one with the water. Same with the afflictions. They're present in our mind, but they're not mixed with our mind. So we understand that by looking at this kind of conventional nature of the mind, see that spaciousness, that these afflictions are not mixed with the mind, we can separate them, right? So this mindfulness, close placement of mindfulness on the conventional nature of the mind gives us that insight that it's these afflictions that we sometimes we grasp onto as being me. That's I can never change. It's not true at all, right? So we get this understanding they're just coming due to causes and conditions, and if we put the right antidotes, we can get rid of them. So it shows liberation is possible, and even further on, enlightenment is possible. So we have to understand what's stopping us from becoming enlightened is fully purified, realized mind. We talk so much about in the minor tradition, because what's stopping us getting there is a very subtle imprints of the afflictions. So even that can be removed. So how's that removed? The wisdom needs more power. Where's the power coming from? From compassion, bodhicitta. With that mind of compassion, bodhicitta, when it's stronger and stronger, gives fuel to the wisdom becomes stronger, and that cuts through this grasping at me, that's the latencies of that. And we get to what we call this purified, realized mind of enlightenment, right? So in that way, we see, although we are not there, we see it's possible. It's a bit like us right now. We may be impatient, a little bit intolerant of certain situations and people, but if you make the right constructive antidotes, we see that the anger or that impatient mind doesn't have power over us. We can actually override that emotion, right? So it gives us power that if we can do that more and more and more, we can actually become quite patient in many situations, with many people, different people, and that gives us this self-confidence and this courage to just keep practicing, because it just, again, so there's, for us, these positive emotions, I'm not sure all of you, but some of you may be quite developed. For us, they're like baby sprouts growing. So we have to nourish them, because if we don't keep nourishing them, they won't be powerful enough to override the negative emotions. So we have to do some effort, right? So that's where the training comes in. That's where meditation comes in. That's where the teachings come in. We have to understand how those afflictions can be reduced. So we have to understand by listening. Then we have to put that into practice. And then we see, you get courage that it works. Then this trust comes. Then the trust comes also, where did these teachings come from? So we look at the Buddha, look at people like the teachers around us, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and they're living examples of this. So trust comes in. It's also possible to be like this. They're the examples, right? So this, the second aspect of looking at the mind, you see it's kind of neutral. Actually, the general mind is neutral by nature, right? It changes second by second. The first aspect is impermanent, then it's also neutral. So all these afflictions, etc., can taint it, like putting color into water, but it's not the actual nature of the water. But same with the positive emotions. So of course, for us, some of them are fleeting, they're adventitious, depending on what if you put training into it. But the good thing is, with the positive emotions like patience, generosity, kindness, wisdom, the more we put effort into it, the more we train in them, because they are valid minds, right? They're not like the afflictions, which are misconception. They're valid minds. They can be improved, they can be stable. So then they will never leave our minds. So that's, again, why liberation and enlightenment is possible, because that's what they have. They have these stable minds which are positive, of patience, generosity, loving kindness, ethics. They're all, like, look at the six perfections. They're all minds, right? And they're based on valid perceptions. You see, valid, coming through reasoning, and that they cannot be lost. Like, even for us, some of our values we've taken up, or understandings, they can't be lost, because we've reasoned it through, and we've meditated on it. They're actually quite stable now. Like, for example, for some of you, maybe trust in the teachings, the trust that somebody like this existed, or the Buddha existed, because we experienced the benefits of the teachings. It's difficult to lose them, right? They're kind of stable in our minds. So we can see how the positive emotions can be improved more and more and more. Right? And that also shows that enlightenment, liberation is possible. It gives us that courage that what we're working for is something useful for us, brings us peace first, and then of course around us, as we interact with others with these states of mind, help so many people like that. Okay. So the other aspect of then you go into kind of more the ultimate nature of the mind. So we see this conventional nature, this kind of neutrality to it, this taste, this neutrality, that all afflictions and the positive emotions are coming and going into this kind of pool of ocean. But in looking again at the conventional nature of the mind and trying to, so sometimes we might say, well, that's me, that's who I am. That's kind of my mind. So we can identify with that as being me. So we have to again check, well, how can I how can I this kind of, so again we have to check. It's not like we're not we're not looking at the conventional nature of who we are. Yeah, so I'm sure a lot of you heard, the I is based on the body and mind. It's a mental, it's a name given to the body and mind, it's based on the body and mind, the two phenomena which exist. The body exists. We looked again the first session, all these parts, it exists, but again, even the body is labeled on the parts. So then we look at the mind. The mind also somehow we think, well, that's me. Somehow we think, well, the body is not me. Obviously, it's not me because, but it must be the mind because the mind is thinking, feeling, etc. But then we look. Then the mindfulness is put on this. How can this phenomena mind be me? So to think, why would it not? Because when we look at me, it's like the object we're looking at is a single entity, a me somewhere here, and also it's like a me that's owning the mind. We say it's my mind. In the same way we say it's my body, we say it as my mind. So again, there's two things, right? How can we be mind, and then there's a me owning the mind because it's my mind. So how can that be possible? Because you say I am my mind, but you can't because it's like a me that owns a mind. So you can't have that mind as being you. Another way to think is this single entity me, because when we think of an I, like or Heather or Gendun, right? You say the name, it's a single phenomena. It's not like there's many aspects of me. There's normally, in essence, is me. As so many people are talking about a soul or something, it's like one entity. So that Gendun, where is it in the mind? Because the mind, again, we look at the general neutral aspect of mind, like the ocean. You may think, well, that's me. It's not the afflictions. It's not the positive emotions. Take them away. They're all fleeting. But the real essence, if you look behind all of that, is me, is the mind. But that one entity in whom, where is it in all the milliseconds of mind as it's moving on, right? You can't put that entity into one of those milli moments of mind because mind is divided into all these moments. So where can the me be? That's one aspect. Looking at when we see the absence of a me in that string of moments of mind, it cannot be found. There's an absence of me on mind, right? So the mindfulness focuses on the absence, so on the emptiness of the mind, the ultimate nature of mind, right? And you get a sense of. So it can be a little bit scary for sometimes because first we negated the idea that we are the body because sometimes it becomes but that becomes a bit more obvious, I guess. But then we look at, well, there must be something here then. If it's not the body, it must be the mind. Then you think, well, there's no me in the mind either. Then where is it? Who am I? So there can be this despondency, this kind of fear. But like many teachers say, like, Rinpoche and His Holiness, depends on the merit, you see, it depends on the merit. Sometimes it's very scary because we're so not used to it. So such a new phenomena, this absence of this thing we were so in love with, we cherished ourselves, this me somewhere here, and it's gone. This thing we just is gone. So such a scary moment. But for some, with merit, maybe past lives, or this life, it becomes so blissful. They finally understand that the thing that has been causing all their trouble doesn't exist at all the way they thought. It's such a relief. It's like, wow, that kind of feeling comes. But then it depends, where we are in our practice. So if we look carefully, it can lead to great bliss, or it can be a bit scary. But again, that fear, maybe that sensation, unpleasant, but could be spiritual. And that then you think, okay, so what is it that's existing here? Because there is something here. You don't go into nothing. So then we go into the idea there is still a self, based on the body and mind. It's just a mere label put on the body and mind. Like that. And that's how we exist. Just all the parts of the body, all the parts of the mind, the moments of mind. Based on that, there's a self. And that's perfectly okay. That's how we exist. And that's even the Buddha. He has the idea of self. It wasn't like he's disappeared into space. There is a self based on the body and mind, because the mind was completely purified, realized. Then based on that, you can call him awakened one, because he awakened from ignorance and all the afflictions. So based on that, we call the person the Buddha. That's all right. And he didn't go around thinking, oh, I am, I am now enlightened with grasping it. It's me. It's just he can positively say, I have done my work. I've done the work that has to be done. I have purified the mind, and that's perfectly okay. Right? We just don't understand that in our minds, this ignorance is so ingrained it comes automatically. So if you remember how Rinpoche used to talk quite often. So I've never seen other teachers talk like this. But this is the way he used to describe it. He said, look, basically, and he used to sometimes go the other way. Like he used to start from the conventional self. And he said, just sit, watch how your body, for example, the mindfulness of the body with all its parts. You look at the mind with all its moments, and you come to the understanding of a self, me, sitting here. And this is perfectly okay, conventional self, right? But like, as the mind labels that me, self, on the body and mind, instant, like a millisecond later, the mind grasps that self, which just came to the mind, the conventional self, grasps that as a truly existent, independent, permanent phenomena, a me that's existing independent of the body and mind. Right? And we grasp at that as being true. And because of that, there's me, I like this. Me, I don't like that. And I like this person, I don't like that situation, da 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 da, and all the afflictions come up, etc. because of this grasping. Yeah, so you start with the conventional nature, and you start setting. So sometimes he'd say, like, you go on the conventional nature of the person, and then see what happens. You imagine a situation when you are now criticized, or you have a situation you don't like, and see how the I suddenly comes up quite strongly. Then you can see, how can such a thing exist? How can such a thing which is completely independent of the body and mind exist? Like that. Same with the mind. Yeah, if you look now at the close placement of the mind, of course you can look at the impermanent nature, the first kind of step. You see, well, how can a mind be truly what we call inherently there, like a me as mind, when in fact it's impermanent. It's changing second by second. It's something cannot be inherently. When we talk about this inherent existence, it means not dependent. So how can something be completely independent when the mind we just looked at is changing second by second? It is impermanent. So how can there be such a mind that's inherently existent in this phenomena, which is changing second by second? That's why the impermanent nature of the mind, if you look closely, it can lead. It's a stepping stone to realizing the emptiness of the mind. It's not the direct way, but it leads to that, because seeing, when we think mind is inherent existence, it means it's independent of causes, conditions, independent of parts, and independence even of a mind labeling that phenomena. Yeah, because the mind itself is the name we give for this phenomena, which is changing second by second. Yeah. We have to be able to give these things labels, otherwise we can't talk about it. So otherwise we can't function. But we have to give the right label on a valid basis. We can't call anything mind, right? So it has to be on a valid basis. So on this phenomena, which is clear and knowing, can cognize, and it's changing second by second, we call it mind. That's how it exists on this phenomena with all the parts, the eyes, etc. Put together. We call it a body. What doesn't matter what language you use, in French or Italian, it gives a label. That's how this phenomenon exists. But if you look for an independent body separate from all these parts, it doesn't exist. Same with the mind, right? The mind's a little bit more subtle to see. So the body is more gross. So actually, even these four objects we're using, the body, sensations, mind, and then next week we'll do the kind of the phenomena as such. It's a gross to a subtle level. We're getting from the body, the gross level. You can see impermanent, impure, empty. See sensations also impermanent. Leads to afflictions. Also, if you look at a feeling, you can't actually find a real feeling sensation there as they arise. Unpleasant, pleasant, neutral. The mind is even more subtle, so we're getting a little bit more subtle. The objects we're using gets more subtle, like that. Then, we get a little bit more understanding of who we are, what we are. We're seeing the bigger picture in a way, and that hopefully leads to more peace. That's what we're looking for. Right? We're looking for more peace in our mind, would stop our gross misunderstandings, the misconceptions, and we create so much havoc and suffering in ourselves. Then we create havoc and suffering for others by our attitude. So we're trying to reduce that. We're trying to do something about that because we see it as being desirable. Yeah, it's a good sensation because that leads us to do something about it, right? So it's kind of leads us into looking for a method, a path, to use to make ourselves better, because we also see if we're better with others around us, right? So that way. Okay, so let's have a small break. Okay, then I'll lead a small meditation into this aspect on the mind. Okay, just 5 minutes. Okay, thank you. Michael, is it clear enough now? Is it loud now?
Yes.
Okay, that's good. Any questions before we start the meditation? Oh, good. All is clear. Super crystal clear. Who was in your video, Zilla? Somebody came on.
My grandson.
All right, he's interested in what's going on.
Yes. He's a little busy all the time.
All right, cool. Just to show he's around. Okay, let's start. So let's use some of the things we just listened to. So we'll start with the posture again. Please take a position that you're comfortable to meditate for like the next 20 minutes. So you can do a quick scanning meditation like we did before in the beginning. And then again, as you go through the body scanning, you can do this meditation by looking at the part individually. Kind of try to see it separate from the body and see how it actually is. The insides of our body, the liver, heart, etc., all the organs, flesh, muscles, tendons, bones. And then as we do that, there may be sensations arising which are maybe unpleasant as we actually see the parts of the body as they are. It can be a neutral sensation, maybe like a calm sensation, as opposed to how we normally look at the body, like it's all these parts put together in a certain way, we get very attached to the body. So see how this practice leads to a more realistic view of what the body is. Changing second by second, all the elements inside, the heat element, water element, and then try to focus a little bit on the sensations that are arising as we're sitting here, the physical sensations and the mental sensations. And see how they're coming up in the mind. So then try to see the mind as this kind of ocean, sky, kind of clear by nature, but the sensations arise depending on what contact we have. Remembering, thinking of the future, thinking of the past. So just try to let the mind settle down into that clarity by not focusing on thoughts of the past, future. try to develop that introspection. That's kind of spying, watching if you're actually staying in that clarity, or you start to go back to past events, or you're thinking of future events. And then very quickly, but very gently, you bring your mindfulness back to what you're doing. Stay in the present moment, in that clarity of the mind. To try to see the mind like a blank canvas in a way. So yeah, sometimes when we wake up in the morning, depending how we're thinking, or what happened, or what we did, or even what dreams we had, or how we slept, completely affects the mind. It taints the mind. It can be joyful, or can be sad, can be down. So all these kind of mental factors influence our general mind. But the mind itself, it's clear. So as we get in touch, we have glimpses of this clarity, this spacious nature of the mind. We may think that's me, that's my mind, or I am mind. These ideas might come up, the feelings might come up. So there's an analysis, this insight we check. How can this I be mind? If you were just mind, nobody could see you because you don't have body. So you're not just the mind. If you say it's my mind, there's an owner of the mind. So the basis that we own the mind and the me that owns it are two separate phenomena. So you cannot own mind, you cannot be the owner of the mind. So we'd have to question, who is the owner? Where is that phenomena that owns the mind? And as we again look at this conventional nature of the mind, it appears to be truly findable, truly there, that we can kind of put our finger to it. That's it. But see the mind as this flow, this flux, like a river. Every moment of mind rolling into the next moment. So in this kind of fleeting phenomena, moments of mind passing by, how can there be something findable, a true kind of independent mind? So independent means not depending on causes, conditions, not depending on parts. It's a similar way with the body, completely dependent on causes, conditions. Similar way to feelings, also dependent, causes, conditions on parts. Same with the mind. So because of this clarity, because of the conventional nature of their mind, which is not mixed with the afflictions, afflictions come and go depending on causes, conditions. We can apply antidotes, the correct methods that reduce the afflictions, reduce their power over us. So perhaps we've already tasted that. That's why we're interested in Buddhist teachings. And it gives us hope, encouragement to keep using the methods as they work for us. And we can see that what the Buddha talked about, what we called a complete liberation from all these afflictions, is actually possible for us. So that third noble truth that we're going to talk about and philosophize about so much is actually tangible. We see it's a valid phenomena we can aim at, as a method that we can use to get to that kind of state. We see our own potential. So now turn the attention to the beings around us, starting with close ones, where empathy, loving kindness can naturally arise. Seeing them also in the same way. They have the same potential, completely unaware. And we see them in the same way that we see ourselves. We're kind of trapped because we don't see that reality. We don't see those afflictions as just temporary, passing. We have all these misconceptions with the body. Others' bodies get attached. Craving arises, craving to have, craving not to have. In a similar way, we now generate a real happiness for ourselves, so loving kindness for ourselves, compassion for ourselves. We started by looking at how we can leave samsara, we can stop the causes of suffering. We wish the same for others. How wonderful if they use their potential. And then move on to people you mix with or people you don't know so well. There's no real bond yet. So we only call them neutral or strangers. Start with one, add more and more, try to have that same concern, that same affection, and then wish for them to have happiness, for them to be free of difficulty, suffering, for them to use and become aware of their potential, to meet all the conditions and causes, to use that potential to improve their minds. And then move on to a slightly difficult person right now in your life. Try to make it very real, some person affecting you. Try to have the same reflection, the impermanent body, then the sensations that arise, give into craving, and all those sensations are fleeting in their mind. The mind has that clarity like we have. They also have the potential to be free of all suffering and have all happiness. And then we can move to all sentient beings. If you can the general subject, all beings. We started slowly with people close to us, then strangers, then difficult people, then going to all beings, such as not all human beings, every being, every sentient being. And then from there, slowly come back to you sitting here, seeing how, again, lucky we are, have the conditions in this present life to see this potential, to see how we can achieve this complete peace, liberation, and then we aim that not just for our own peace, but complete enlightenment, peace, and have that power, the enlightened activities, to then benefit all these beings who are so lost, so confused, all in their misconceptions, craving for this and that, completely blind to the inner potential that they have. Then we can dedicate all this positive energy from listening, meditating, understanding, to be able to actually touch that, to taste that enlightened mind, to achieve that for ourselves, in our own minds, to benefit others. All these beings we just thought about. These people we call strangers, difficult people, but once very close family, in a way we're just one big family, but through time we cannot remember. And dedicate for all of these beings also to slowly may their karma ripen for them to also become aware of reality, to have all the conditions, external, internal, to use their lives in a very meaningful way and eventually also achieve complete enlightenment, liberation from all these afflictions. How wonderful that would be. All the people creating so much difficulty, harm in the world right now. All the people suffering under that. And we dedicate also for teachers who are sharing all this knowledge. We think of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Think of Rinpoche, may he come back quickly in any way that's suited for the disciples, students. So all the traditions, the Buddhist traditions, wherever there are beings teaching the true paths, leading people away from the misconceptions, how wonderful if they have long and healthy lives, continue to bring people into virtue, into wisdom, into compassion. Okay, then you can relax and take those feelings, sensations, thoughts into your evening. I guess you're going to sleep soon. But yeah, so that's one way of meditating, okay, on the mind. Yes, anyway, I'll give maybe a thing next week for that. For the mind, you got the impermanence, the conventional nature, the ultimate nature, and then it gives an understanding of how the afflictions are not one nature with the mind, and they can be reduced by antidotes and eventually eliminated. It gives the idea of true cessations. And of course, true paths, which leads to that. So we understand a bit more the Four Noble Truths. Okay? Michael? All right. Sorry, was it clear? Sometimes when I lead the meditation, it becomes even more soft than normal. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much. Have a good evening, everybody, or good morning, or good day, wherever you are.
Thank you, Venerable.